Welcome to Nutrition. This is Dr. Urbi.Ghosh. This is part 2 of chapter 1, lecture. As we talked about in the previous video, what the classes and sources of the various nutrients are divided into two major classes: macronutrients, such as carbohydrates, fats, and proteins, and micronutrients, vitamins and minerals. The macronutrients, which are the carbohydrates, fats, and proteins, we need in large quantities. And the micronutrients, micro meaning small, we need in small amounts. So examples of minerals are calcium and iron, for example, that are involved in making strong bones and helping carry the oxygen in our blood. Examples of carbohydrates are either simple or complex, such as sugars or starches found in potatoes. Fats are made out of either fatty acids or glycerol molecule, and proteins are primarily made out of amino acids. Vitamins come in two categories: fat-soluble and water-soluble. So out of the 6 major classes of nutrients, the carbohydrates, the lipids, the proteins, the vitamins, the minerals, and the water, the macronutrients make up the 3 categories: the carbohydrates, the lipids, and the proteins. So if you look at the major functions of nutrients, nutrients can be assigned to 3 major functional categories. Those that are primarily provide us with energy to meet the energy needs of the organism, such as kilcals. And then the second one is to promote growth, development, and maintenance of the organism. The third major function acts to keep our body functions running smoothly. Now, some functions overlap among these categories, as you can see, but the primary purpose of carbohydrates, lipids, and proteins is to provide us with energy, whereas proteins can also help to promote growth and development and maintenance, as well as regulate body processes like enzymes. Vitamins and minerals are mainly involved in regulating body processes and promoting growth and development maintenance. And water is involved a little bit in both and overlapping that category. Now, what are the 2 major classes of nutrients? Macronutrients and micronutrients. Macronutrients, as I mentioned, you need in large quantities, 1 gram or more, and these are the carbohydrates, the lipids, the proteins, and water. The micronutrients are in milligrams or micrograms, and these are the vitamins and minerals. They're needed in micro amounts or small amounts by the body, but they're still important. Now, chemically, the major macromolecules are carbohydrates, and the building blocks of this are simple sugars. And then also you have the larger units, which are the polysaccharides or the complex sugars. Now, the simple sugars, frequently referred to as sugar, are relatively small molecules, and these sugars are found naturally in fruits, vegetables, and dairy products. Table sugar, known as sucrose, is an example of a simple sugar and is added to many foods that we eat. Glucose, also known as blood sugar or dextrose, is an example of a simple sugar in our blood. Whereas complex carbohydrates are formed when many simple sugars are joined together. For example, plants store carbohydrates in the form of starch, like in potatoes, a complex carbohydrate made of thousands and hundreds of glucose molecule units. Bread, cereals, and grains are starchy vegetables that are the main sources of complex carbohydrates. Now, during digestion, complex carbohydrates are broken down into simple sugar molecules and absorbed via cell lining, the small intestine, into the bloodstream. However, the bonds between the sugar molecules in certain complex carbohydrates are hard to break, and that's because of the particular type of bonding that occurs, and this causes the fiber in plants, for example, because of the bond way it's bonded, these sugar molecules, it cannot be broken down by human digestive processes. Now, fiber will pass through the small intestine undigested and provide the bulk in our stool or feces among the large intestine. Proteins are made out of amino acids, and they are the main structural material of the body. They are also important components of blood, body cells, enzymes, and immune factors. Proteins can also provide calories for the body, on average of 4 kilocalories per gram. Now, typically, the body uses little protein for the purpose of meeting daily caloric intakes. Protein is found in its subunit forms in the form of amino acids that are bonded together. And some of these are essential nutrients. Protein in our diet comes from animal and plant sources. The animal products are meat, poultry, fish, dairy products, and eggs, and significant sources of protein in eating pattern. Bean, grains, and some vegetables are good plant protein sources and are important to include in the vegetarian diet. Now, lipids, the subunits are lipids, are fatty acids and glycerol molecules, and we eat these foods to provide energy. Lipids yield more calories per gram than do carbohydrates, on average 9 kilocalories per gram because the differences of their chemical composition. They are also the main source of energy storage in our body. Lipids dissolve in certain chemical solvents, but not in water. Generally, fats are lipids that are solid at room temperature. Oils are lipids that are liquid in room temperature. We obtain fats and oils from animal and plant sources. Animal fats, such as butter or lard, are solid at room temperature, and plant oils, such as corn and olive oil, tend to be liquid at room temperature. To promote heart health, most people would benefit from using more plant oils in the place of solid fat. Now, fats are essential nutrients that must come from our diet. As you can see here, the food we intake provides us with proteins, complex carbohydrates, and triglycerides. The key fats that our body cannot produce are called essential fatty acids and perform very important functions in our body that can help regulate blood pressure and play a role in the synthesis and repair of vital cell parts. However, we need only about 4 tablespoons of common plant oils such as olive oil or soybean oil each day to supply the essential fatty acids. A serving of such fatty acids such as salmon or tuna at least twice a week is a healthy source of fats. The unique fatty acids in these fish complement the healthy aspects of some common plant oils. And we'll talk more about how digestion of these various nutrients all lead to the energy production, which leads to the energy intermediate ATP that our body uses. These are all what we call catabolic reactions, which means they're cutting the larger molecules into the smaller subunits so that we can harness the energy to ATP molecules. The other opposite direction are called the anabolic reaction. Anabolic meaning adding the molecules together, and you can take the molecules and synthesize larger molecules for things like storage or protein synthesis. Carbohydrates are primarily composed of carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen. What kinds of foods are made mainly of carbohydrates? Well, things like sugary candy or French fries that are made out of potatoes are starchy, and carbohydrates make that up. Also, the outside of plant cells, you can find carbohydrates in the plant cell wall. So the major functions of carbohydrates is to yield energy. It's the primary source of energy in our body, 4 kilocalories per gram, adds sweetness to foods. There are 2 forms, simple sugars and complex carbohydrates. Simple sugars are found in monosaccharides and disaccharides. Complex carbohydrates are found in glycogen, starch, and fiber. The major food sources are grains, fruits, and vegetables. So what are carbohydrates? By definition, carbohydrates are a biological compound containing carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen that is important important for energy food source. Your body uses carbohydrates to make glucose and fuel your body energy. Glucose can be immediately made or stored, and healthier foods have high in carbohydrates are the ones that also have dietary fiber without added sugar. Carbohydrates can be found in the following: fruits, vegetables, bread, cereals, and other grains, milk and milk products, food containing added sugar. There's two types of categories of carbohydrates. There's complex carbohydrates and simple carbohydrates. In terms of complex carbohydrates, you can think of starch as your primary complex carbohydrate, and they are found in vegetables such as potatoes, dried beans, cereals, and corn. Fiber is high in these vegetables, and this is good because it helps with the digestion of these carbohydrates. So fiber can be either found in soluble or insoluble, and both are important for health, digestion, and preventing diseases. On the other hand, you have simple carbohydrates, which can be found naturally or in added sugars. Added sugars have fewer nutrients than foods with naturally occurring sugars. Examples of these ingredients of added sugar are brown sugar, corn sweeteners, corn syrup, dextrose, fructose, fruit juice concentrates, glucose, and high fructose corn syrup. Honey is about 50-50. It's 50% sucrose and 50% glucose. So in terms of good versus bad carbs, some diet books make a big deal about it. Good carbs are used to describe foods that have more fiber and complex carbohydrates. Complex carbohydrates are carbohydrates that take longer to break down into glucose. The Dietary Guidelines for Americans in 2005, for example, recommended choosing fiber-rich carbohydrate choices from vegetable, fruit, and grain groups and avoid added sugars. It is also recommended that at least half of your daily grain choices are whole grains. Now, some carbohydrates are classified as bad because we talk about foods that are refined carbohydrates. Refined carbohydrates, meaning they're made from white flour and added sugars. Example of bad carbohydrates include white bread or pasta, cookies, and cakes, which are highly processed. These foods are higher in the carbohydrates and are also found in things like sodas and candies, which have added sugar. These carbs are not good because they have added calories but not many nutrients to your diet. So tips for avoiding added sugar: choose water instead of sugar-sweetened sodas. Choose 4 fluid ounces of 100 fruit juice rather than fruit drink. Have a piece of fruit for dessert and skip desserts with added sugar. Choose breakfast cereals that contain no or less added sugar. So if you look at the different added sugars, drink for thought, you can see that a 12-ounce, for example, Coca-Cola has 140 calories from sugar, whereas a 20-ounce soda will have 240 calories from soda, and 1 liter will have about 400 calories from sugar. So a pound of sugar usually equals approximately 3,500 calories. So if you drink 2 12-ounce cans of regular soda a day, it's about 280 calories, and you multiply that by 7 days a week, and then you'll get to about 1,960 calories per week. And then if you look at that over a 2-week period, you're looking at 3,920 calories over a 2-week period. So potentially, you could lose over 2 pounds in 2 weeks just by cutting out your composition of regular soda. In the next lecture, we'll talk about dietary fiber and how much we need. Dietary fiber is very important, and it helps in many ways, and we'll talk about this topic in the next lecture.